I am swagged out. If you guys are watching on YouTube, on Spotify, I'm wearing it. If you're gonna send me merch, I will merch it out all day. Here's the water bottle. Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Fail with Fire. I am your podcast host, Phoenix Ha, CEO and co-founder of AdBeacon, my favorite attribution and optimization platform. Today, again, on the Fail with Fire podcast, we're going to start talking about failures and how the fires are the catalysts to change. The most important conversations are the real ones, and I thought I'd bring some thought leaders to the table, including our next guest, Rishabh. I am so excited to introduce him to you. He's the CEO of Fermat, also the co-founder of Fermat. I am swagged out. If you guys are watching on YouTube, on Spotify, I'm wearing it. If you're going to send me merch, I will merch it out all day. Here's the water bottle. It's a beautiful green. But before I actually have him speak, let me do the official introduction. So yes, Rishabh Jain is the CEO and co-founder of Fermat, the customer journey optimization platform loved by rapidly growing direct-to-consumer brands like Arma, Mind, Body Green, and True Classic. If you know True Classic teas, OGs, they're there. Prior to building Fermat, Rishabh spent over 5 years at LiveRamp, where he most recently held the role of VP of Innovation. Whatever that means, we will dive in. And new business initiatives. During his tenure, he spearheaded the development of several successful ventures, including scaling a healthcare business from zero to multi-million-dollar revenue in under 2 years. Rishabh also orchestrated the acquisition and growth of Factor BV, transforming it into a top 5 consent management platform within 24 months. With academic accolades from the Wharton School, Stanford, and a PhD from MIT. Wow, way to make me feel so dumb. Rishabh brings a wealth of expertise to drive innovation and business growth. With all due respect, I am humbled by your presence. Rishabh, welcome to the podcast.
Wow. I don't even know what to do now.
I don't either, man. I read that and I'm like, oh shit.
Oh my God. That's embarrassing. Yeah. If Lex sent that to you, I think I need to talk to Lex about toning it down.
It's God. She put like the weight on the table. It was like a big thunk, it's like one of those paperweights that just got dropped on a glass table is what I feel right now. So good job. And it was like, wow. Okay.
Yeah, and now everything that comes out of my mouth is going to sound significantly dumber than that first read. So it's
That's
like
the goal.
so we're about to fail by fire immediately after that.
But welcome to the podcast. For those who don't know, if you want like the informal introduction, if you see him on LinkedIn or on Twitter with a whiteboard behind him and he keeps pointing at the whiteboard with the marker, that's Rishabh. So that's the MIT like guy, PhD from MIT, all like the things that I just said that Alexa made pretty. That is Rishabh.
Yeah, thank you. What do we do? What am I supposed to do now?
You know what? This is what I'll do, make it less awkward. First of all, welcome to the podcast. We are so excited to have you, truly. And second of all, I always like to start off with how we met. And prior to us filming, you actually called me out, which was like a beautiful. I was like, oh yeah, we met at this house party. And you were like, no, we actually met at Commerce Roundtable a year ago. And it was at this little cafe area and we started talking. So what was happening, by the way, just some backstory is, I don't really like to be around a lot of people. I'm an extrovert, sure, but I'm a strategic extrovert. And I like to just sit at a table and let people come to me. And it worked because you came.
Totally. It totally worked.
Yeah.
Mostly because I am the opposite of an extrovert. And so like a conference is my hell. Like trying to go and have conversations with like a large number of people is exactly what I dislike doing. So I love one-to-one conversations. I love public speaking. But I really dislike the conference mingling, which is our mutual friend Rabba's superpower, if you ask me. But I think like, anyways, that's why I was outside of the main conference and at that cafe area, and I just saw a couple of people and I was like, man, the company has spent money to put me in this conference. I should at least go talk to this smaller group of people. And so then I was like, it was like a great group of people because it was a smaller group of people. It was less like socially anxious for me. And so, yeah, it was awesome because I got to meet you there. And at least in my mind, that's what allowed me to feel comfort in us having that longer one-to-one convo at the house party. And so that's like that's why I remembered it, is because the more meaningful interaction was for sure at that LA event. Um, and that's also like where I feel the most personally connected to people is in those one-on-one convos, right?
It's so funny you say that because you're right. Like, so I believe like minds kind of attract each other in our behavior, right? So they say if you meet someone at a bar, you're probably going to meet someone who loves alcohol. You meet someone at a, library, they're a psychopath. So it's like, natural. And we were sitting there. It's so funny because now it's all connecting. It makes sense. But I distinctly remember we were at this LA party. It was a Chew on This party with like a bunch of different sponsors there. I think you were one of them. And it was a great event, but I came for the after party and our friend Rabba was there. And, he was like so amped on this. And I was like, I can't do this. This is too much. Like, there's too many people. There's too many things. And I distinctly remember going to the balcony area outside with the air because I was like trying to survive. And I see you there and we just start talking. But we don't just start talking about like attribution and optimization and all the stuff that comes with customer journeys. We start talking about family. And I remember you distinctly talking about your family and what was going on and all these things. And that's how I connect with people. And then I'm like, okay, we are real life friends aside from SaaS friends. SaaS friends comes later. And I think it was just a really cool start to this
So
friendship. So yeah.
totally, I love that, and I appreciate that too.
Me too. Me too. And then it was just so funny. It's synergistic because then Raba was there and, I love Raba and Alexa and the good people, again, flock to good people. So it makes sense that they're at Fermat. And I've been seeing so many great things that you're doing, but we're not actually here to talk about D2C as much. We're really here to talk about failures. But before we do that, there's a tradition here at this podcast. And basically what I always like to do is our family often doesn't know what we do, right? It's like this weird obscure world where we press buttons and think we're the shit. Okay. So if we were at a barbecue and I'm walking by and your wife comes and grabs me and goes, Phoenix, I need you to meet him. Um, how would she introduce you to me high level?
I think the way my wife would introduce me is basically saying like, "Hey, I think that you and him may actually talk to each other because all he wants to do is talk about work, and you seem like you like talking about work."
All those reliable workaholics. You're like, hey, Louis about work too much. He talks about work too much. You two should just hang out.
Totally. So I think that's what would happen there. And then I think yeah, you were kind enough to send like some of the prep beforehand, and it's one of the framings was like, how would your mom or dad introduce you? And I think the way that my mom or dad would introduce me was just like, you know, he doesn't he doesn't talk a whole lot, but he's running a business in this e-com space thing, and it sounds like you're also interested in that, so you guys should probably talk to each other. Like that's actually how I think like most people would think about interactions with me is like the total amount of talking tends to not be a lot unless it's about something deliberate. Yeah.
I could see that because when we first started talking, you can tell when your eyes light up about something you're passionate about. And usually like the ease into a conversation is like the bullshit. It's like, hey, how's your day? How's the weather? Like that type of stuff. And I should tell it was so disinteresting to you. And same with me. Like I'm like, okay, like, are we done yet? But then when we start talking about data and the nerdy shit, oh, the eyes just like lit up, right? I'm the same way and I respect that. So I'm really grateful we were able to connect on that level. And it's cool that your family sees the passion there. That's how they would introduce you. My mom straight up thinks one day I'm an influencer, the next day I work at Meta, whatever helps her in that moment when her ad account shuts, not ad account, sorry, her Facebook page shuts down. That's when I'm there. Otherwise, like she has no clue. So I love this question because often our partners or our, family truly doesn't know, but they love us and they say, okay, pat on the head. That's nice.
Exactly. Yeah, that's exactly. You know what's funny is with my daughter, so I have a 3-year-old,
Mhm.
And the way that I get her to like have breakfast or a meal together is we'll sit on either side of the table and I'll call it a meeting. And so like that even like sort of has pervaded into like how I communicate with my daughter. And like she then feels more involved with like how I go about the rest of my day, which has been amazing. Yeah.
That's actually like, just to let you know, my mom did something very similar when I was younger. So this will encourage you, hopefully, as a father. But when my mom is an amazing entrepreneur, and I distinctly remember being in her office, and there's, those old school vents on the floor that would bring up air, and you would
Yeah.
just like talk to yourself in them. Yeah, that was me. And she was like doing her taxes, and I remember her talking, and I would listen to her on phone calls, and I'd be there just like talking to myself into this vent, but distinctly listening to the way my mom was doing business. And then once I started making money modeling, she made sure I did my own invoicing and she would teach me that. And it was kind of like a meeting. So I just remember thinking of my mom and like putting her in this place of like, wow, I want to be that. This is business. This is something else. And I was able to differentiate a lot in terms of what is serious and what is not at a young age. So I hope that encourages you. What you're doing for your daughter is awesome because fundamentally that's a huge part of my life.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
I'd love to hear that. Yeah.
Just full circle, full circle. I think life is like a circle. But okay. I want us to get to the nitty gritty, to the juicy part of this podcast and why people come here. And there's a lot of success with Fermat and a lot of the businesses you've been a part of. So it's not just Fermat, right? Like that whole intro was a mouthful for a reason, and that also comes with a lot of failure. Whatever failure that is, whether it be professionally, financially, personally, these are usually the points where we have fire in us that become catalysts to huge change. I'd like to invite you to share something with
Totally.
us. Yeah, whatever it may be, and walk us through that because I want to get into it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny because that moment for me is so visceral in my mind. And uh, it has not changed yet. Like that moment is always the one that I go back to. So it was my freshman year of college. I so I went to Penn for undergrad, and going into Penn, like many high school kids who go to Penn, I thought that I was the shit, and I was like, "Oh, this is gonna be easy. It's gonna be no problem." Blah blah blah. And at the end of that first semester, I mean, we now know the full story, so we know that I ended up getting a PhD in solid state physics. But in Introduction to Engineering, I got a B minus in my first semester in college, and this like rocked my identity because I always considered myself to be very good at science and engineering, and I was like, and I had a very light class load. I only had 4 classes. I was like, oh my god, and Penn's average is a B plus, so I was like, I'm below average in the thing that I thought that I was exceptional at, right? And so I was like, what is happening? And that December of like, man, I gotta change something. And so then I like tried really hard second semester and I improved marginally, but not really meaningfully. And so I was like, something has to fundamentally change. And that summer, I was like, what do I do to like fundamentally shift the trajectory that I am going down? Because second semester of like just try harder was not even close to enough. Like the gains were marginal. And so what I decided was like, okay, I need to restructure my day to be able to work harder and work smarter. So I said, I used to like drink and go to frat parties, blah, blah, blah. So I said, okay, sophomore year, I will not drink. I will train myself this summer to go to drink coffee. So I like trained to drink coffee because I didn't like the flavor of coffee before that. And instead of trying to improve on a 4 class load, I'm going to double my class load and see if that forces me into a discipline that makes me get into the place where I believe I should be. So the average class load at Penn was 4. I entered junior year and I took 8 classes. I did not drink. I drank coffee. I slept every day from 12 to 7. So I was like Cinderella. Like if the clock struck midnight, I was going home. Like, it did not matter what was happening. If I was like not done studying, if I was not done, none of it mattered. I was sleeping from 12 to 7. And my life changed instantly. Like, that semester put me on a totally different trajectory. And yeah, it's like what you said, which is like, I felt that failure in a way in which rocked my identity. And then I was like, I have to make a dramatic change. And then I started to be able to do things that, like, I would never have even tried if it were not for that failure.
You know what's crazy about this whole thing? First of all, awesome. Second of all, what the hell, dude? Okay, most people who are freshmen in college don't try to optimize their day. Okay, let's just like talk about that really quickly. That's not normal, but also it makes sense as to who you are and where you are, because I think also I'm going to make an assumption, and you guys can all crucify me, but I'm Chinese and I'm assuming you're Indian. Okay. And there's a standard usually in that household. There's a standard in my household. I'm mixed, so I got a little bit of leeway, but I got a little bit of, oh, she's mixed, you know? But like for me, you know, there was always this really funny video on YouTube. It was like shit Asian moms say, and it was like, B is for bitch, you know, like that was totally through and through. And I remember distinctly, I very much resonate with your story because I was at CSUN and I was failing all my classes. And mind you, I was pre-med. I was also like one of the special kids that went to UCLA. I was supposed to be a doctor, by the way, Rashad. You don't know this, but now you do. And I was like top of the class for that. And I was like probably most promising, but I was failing because I was so distracted with not partying necessarily, but I was a dancer. So I would do dance stuff, whatever. Long story short is I went to a macro econ class that had a 60% fail rate, and something just clicked. And I realized I wasn't stupid. I was just I was just not interested in all the topics, right? So I had a very similar story to yours where their sense of extremism comes into play. And that's why I wanted to like talk about this, because you took a very extreme next step. You weren't like, I'm going to kind of get better. You're like, I'm not going to drink. I'm going to train myself to like coffee, which by the way is insane, but I love that. You're like, I'm going to take on double the course load because if I can't take half of it and make these changes, I'm a bitch. I got to do 8 of them now. And then everything structure wise changed in your life. Do you feel like that extremism in your life continued on like to today?
I think like what happens with most people is it carries you through like a moment of or a chapter of your life. So that version of me was true through till the end of college. And then I had a big reset after college because I was like, you know, I was going to go to London for a year. I already knew I was going to MIT. And so like I had a year essentially break, where I've like traveled to Europe and had fun. And I had that same thing happen to me my first year at MIT, but this time, because I had done it once before, I kind of knew how to do it without being so psychologically hard on myself. I could just do the motions. So like when it happened to me the first time, I was just like, you know, the reason I had to change so much at the same time was because the psychological bar that I felt like I had disappointed, like that identity bar that I felt like I had disappointed, was so dramatic that I felt like I had to change a lot. But then the next time it happened, it's like, now it's sort of like your muscle memory has been built. And so the specific thing that happened was, again, I walk into MIT and I think I'm hot. Like, you know, this whole thing repeats itself over and over again. I think I'm like the best student here because blah, blah, blah. And then my first semester, I do very well. And then my second semester, that hubris kicks my ass and I fail the first semester, not first semester, the first, what is it called? Like the first midterm, the first midterms of both of the classes. So there's only 2 classes when you're a grad student, but I failed both of them. So I was like the bottom 3 of the class in both. And I was like, what the heck? But because I have that muscle memory of like what to do next, I just like did it, and then I was at the top of the class. And so I was like, and so the professors actually like called me aside and were just like, hey, we just want to talk to you because you were at the bottom in the last exam and you're at the top at this exam, and it doesn't add up for us. Like, did something happen? And like, was something happening the first time? We're going to ask, did you cheat this time? Like, like the kinds of things that I got asked were like ridiculous.
But nicely asking you, hey, you were a failure. What happened? Are you lying? Like, hey, we didn't have any hope in you. You were definitely going to be out of this class soon, but now you're here. What's going on? That was like a nice way of putting it. You're like, oh,
Yeah, totally. And so it was like an almost comical interaction to have. But yeah, it's like you kind of develop the muscle memory. And then this story, like, has, of course, the number of times that I encountered like some sort of dramatic failure just continued to increase because I want to continue to put myself in high risk, high reward situations. But my muscle memory for how to interact with it now that it's happening has gotten so good that it just doesn't bother me as much.
it's interesting that you can self-identify areas in which you can just flip on and off and zoom to the front. But also too, there's something like distinct that came out of what you just said that I like want to highlight. One of them being, a lot of kids, I'm going to go back to being Chinese. I'll use the Chinese example. They end up going to Stanford or an Ivy League and they fail. Failing being below a B or a C or even just fail. And how many times have you heard about suicidal thoughts and not being able to come out to their parents and just mentally breaking down? This is a very common thing. So if people who are not familiar with the Asian culture specifically, what would happen is parents like to compare you to other kids. There's a lot of pressure. Like I grew up going home and I would have piano, cello, I had like the equivalent of Kumon. I was not allowed to hang out at any of those like malls. I didn't go to any dances. So there's a lot of high expectations for me. And then you get to college, right? The whole thing ramping up in high school is to get to college. You go to college and you're not hot shit. Like basically what you said, you walk in thinking you're the shit and you're not. But what was interesting is rather than taking the disruptive route for yourself in the sense of like destruction, you took a different route. But the thing that I'm noticing is that you didn't do it for anyone else but yourself. So you realize that the level of failure was something that you recognized that you didn't like yourself. So you made a change and you were self-motivated to change that versus for your parents. And I think that's what's driving you to be a successful business leader now, at least from my point of view.
Yeah, I think it's a really good observation. I was asked this recently in a different context as to whether I'm competitive. And yeah, I find it hard to classify myself as competitive, basically, mostly because it's mostly an internal game as opposed to an external game for me. Yeah.
Yeah. And it could be like a combination of both. Like, for example, we have competitors in the space, right? And I think it's important to see what they're doing, sure. And a lot of people actually have differing views on this. I'm very intrigued to see what yours is, but I actually don't listen or watch personally. And the reason why I don't, number one, I have a team that does it. And number two is I don't want to get distracted from what I know in my heart I need us to get to, where I know where we're going to go, where the vision is, which is our role as a CEO. And for me, I can't do it because I'm competitive with myself. I know the standard in which I set and I know I can outwork other people. So that's the standard. And then when we start getting distracted by the shiny objects, things kind of go downward. You were going to say something.
Oh, yeah. I was going to say it's not that I don't respect competitors. It's just that my driving force is not competition. Yeah.
Oh, no, that's
Yeah.
not what I
Yeah,
mean. What I
exactly.
mean is,
Yeah. And so actually my yes and to what you were saying is like the way that I think about like what is the role of competition is like it's an input just like any other input into your own version of um what is the outcome that you are trying to drive, right? Vision is an input, market is an input, customers are the primary input, and competition is an input, but it's a minority input. And so, or at least I think that's what I've noticed for a lot of people who take their companies very far, right? I think that there is a version of a type of company where you're like, you as the founder are hyper competitive. It's a hyper competitive space. There's very little differentiation. Um, and I think in those cases, being competitive does yield good outcomes. But I think each style has its own, and it's like impossible for a CEO that has one style to build a company that requires the different style. Yeah.
100%. We had an episode with Sean Frank and we were saying something similar. It's just like there's so many different ways to, like, I think he said to man a ship or to like sail a ship. Um, and I completely agree. The comment about the competition, I really was actually trying to poke a bear to see how you would respond in sense of competition in general, because I've noticed you've always played nice, and you should, because there's no reason not to play nice in a space where everybody can eat, right? I think Shaq said that once, and everybody else loves. I love that too. It's really important. But when I think about competition for myself, I think about competition within myself. Maybe narcissistic, but that's the way that I run, right? Because for me, no one's going to hit that standard for me.
Totally.
And
Yeah.
I see a similarity and a through play for you, because often I see a lot of SaaS platforms, they start to chase after what their competition is doing and they lose who they are and they lose why they're different. Yeah, you agree. And then now you're nothing but another app that looks just like theirs, but maybe a couple different features.
Totally. Totally. Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think like when people will ask us often, like, who do you consider to be your competitors? And the way that I tend to answer that question is just, what would it take to accomplish the same outcomes that we drive with whatever combination of tools that you choose, right? And that's like actually the better lens for it, as opposed to like, here's 5 names. Like I mean, those names are irrelevant. So like the relevant question is like, what is the thing that you're trying to accomplish? Yeah.
One of my sales reps, his name is Ben, actually was really cool in the way and that's what I like about our team is there's no one who's right and there's no one who's wrong, right? It's just like, let's all learn together. So he's like, hey, so what I like to ask is, what did you like about that platform? What were some features that you did like about that platform? And then people start to talk about it and we go, okay, yeah, that's great. These are the areas in which we kind of do something similar, but this is also, so we aren't going to go in straight up with negativity. And then also when it comes to naming, I'm in a different space. Fermat, it's kind of, I feel like a little bit easier to describe what you do than I would say attribution. Like, what a dry ass topic. Let's be completely honest with you. Like, it's so dry. And for me, I actually feel out the market and I go, hey, do you know like Triple Whale, Hyros, North Beam, all them? They're like, yeah. I'm like, I'm their direct competitor. Oop. I'll repeat that because I think it cut out. But it's like, I always go, hey, do you know who Triple Whale is? North Beam, Hyros, all them. And they're like, yeah. I'm like, okay, well, I'm the direct competitor. That's what I do. And that's the only way I say things. And then they go, well, what do you think about those platforms? And I go, I think they're great. I believe that the flag in the sand is first party data, and how you get to that is different. And I have my dogs here, so you can hear that.
Amazing. I love that. Yeah. I think that's a really great point, is you are leading with an anchor and then a differentiator. And the anchor is like naming people who the buyer would consider a competitor. And then the differentiator is like, hey, I've anchored you to like, here's roughly where we're swimming. And like, okay, and here's like the clear thing. Here's like the reason why you should come and talk to us. And if there's like other things that you're trying to solve, then maybe we are not the right answer, right? And so like, because we do that too, by the way, right? Like, we're not trying to sell to everybody. In fact, I would say right now, our qualification criteria has become extraordinarily strict. And so like, we're actually trying very hard to be clear about the fact that a certain type of customer is not right for us at this point in time. And we just recommend that they do other things first, right? It's like, hey, actually, it sounds like you need an agency. Here are 5 who we love. Actually, it sounds like you need creative help. Here's like what you should go do. And it's like, the problem, like, we understand your high level problem, but the micro problem is not actually in Fermat's domain. It is in somebody else's domain.
100%. So like, talk about failures to fires, where I have so many personal ones, but I'll use one for AdBeacon. I'm pretty open about this. Also, if you hear my dogs, this is my life now. I have a puppy and I have another dog. Kill me, love it, hate it, all at the same time. Okay, so when we first launched AdBeacon, okay, we had our 2-year anniversary in August this year, which was insane. And our first year, we're like, anyone and everyone who has a heartbeat can have AdBeacon. It's the dumbest thing, right? Now looking at it, I'm like, that was dumb. But we didn't really have, we just like anybody who wanted to buy it, we had it at a really low rate, and we also had a free trial. And what do we know about free trials right now? They don't work because it's they don't work. It's
I cannot agree with you more. I will tell you that the highest failure rate of customers with Fermat is when we have made the mistake of convincing ourselves that, oh, for this one customer, let's allow them to try it for free. And that's why we're so painfully strict now about how we sell. Yeah.
Even if I do a discounted rate for a friend, I don't do free anymore. I don't believe anyone really respects you or your platform or whatever service if it's free. You might think that, guys, but you really don't. So a great example of this is that, like, back in the day, if someone gave me a pair of shoes, I was like, holy shit, right? Like, this is a big deal because they didn't give out shoes. It was known that you never got shoes for free, especially like a Nike, etc. Now everyone's giving you shit for free left and right. So now that pair of shoes doesn't hold the same amount of value as before. And now I'm probably just gonna like, maybe I'll wear them, maybe I won't. And the dynamic is different. We had a similar conversation on a different episode where it was like brands weren't as accessible back in the day, like when they did sweepstakes or when they did like a design competition. And then now, if they don't respond to your DM within a certain amount of time, you're irate because you are entitled to them responding. It's just the evolution. It's not neither good nor bad, right? It's an evolution of the space. But back to the failure is, we realized, number one, I think we only retained 10% of those people that first signed on. Okay. And even if they got our pixel on the site, it was useless. And your platform is only as strong or as valuable as your usage, as you know. So I'm like, okay, great. Now the process is completely different. We only go after agencies. Brands can come to us if they feel like it, but they know they're not really being targeted. Another thing that's really huge is that we made a complete difference where I have to pre-qualify you. I have to approve you as an agency. So even if you find my link, it has to be me that approves it. And if you're not an agency and you want that rate, and now there's a scarcity component, back to the psychology of it. It's like a hyper qualification. But again, it's the retention aspect because that's all we care about in the end, and you need to use it. Anyway, I digress. You get my point. But big failure to fire moment because it changed our business completely.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think the only time when free makes sense. So I'll use one of your named competitors as in, I'll share like an anecdote from Twitter that I saw that is going to get me in trouble for saying out loud, but I'll say it anyway. Someone said on Twitter, wait a second, I'm on the free plan and the next plan up is $1,000 a month. Are you kidding me? And what I wanted to reply, which I did not, is the mistake is not the $1,000 a month. The mistake is the free. And I was like, if I say this, I'm going to get crucified. So I'm going to not say it. I'll say it here because here, if somebody's at this point and still listening, it's like, hopefully they know enough about me to like know why I think that. And it's not just like some random Twitter statement. But yeah, it's precisely because of what you said. It devalues it. And most importantly, it actually reduces the person's capability of understanding what is the best way to get ROI from this tool.
Again, back down to like, okay, I know that tweet because I responded to that tweet. And It's always me on accident. Like, I think we always joke around it's my autism or something just accidentally leaking out. My sister said it. She's a doctor. I can't be in trouble. But yeah, I responded to it and let me have the heat because the thing is, if it's coming from Rashad's mouth, it's really actually just like heuristic and like a approach when it comes to business that is very, I would say, clerical versus mine might be a little bit more emotionally driven. But I'm sitting here and I'm looking at this and I go, no, it's so much more than that because all we have is a first impression. I always think about marketing, business like dating. I've always said this. It's a first impression. So you think you're getting one thing and then you're getting another. That's already going to cause distrust. Another thing too is like, if you're paying for something that you know has value, then you're excited about it because the first thing you learn in business school is that a transaction has to be mutually beneficial. That's it. That stuck with me since day one. It is so simple. It has to be mutually beneficial. So if I say, Rishabh, I'm going to give you a piece of chocolate for a cup of coffee, Rishabh better love chocolate and it better be the chocolate he likes. And that coffee better be the coffee I like. If Rishabh gives me dirt coffee and I give him premium chocolate, that's not a good transaction. It's not going to last. And it's the same way the other way around. Even though it's still chocolate and coffee, people need to understand the value and then the value has to be there. So that's a big, big thing for me. And when I read that tweet that you're speaking to, my thoughts went the same direction. And it's not even knock on the platform. I think the platform's fantastic. I just think that is kind of the psychology behind pricing.
Totally. I totally agree.
Ew, we agree. We have our own gang now. Also, this Fermat merch is fire. I know there's something else coming out. And I know I don't know if you want to drop it here. I don't know if it's announced, but what you have currently is beautiful.
Thank you. Yeah. I think like the primary principle is if you're going to bother making merch, at least make it something that the person wants to wear. So it's like, yeah, I mean, it's kind of not terribly more or less complicated. Like either it's fun or on nose or beautiful, like for whatever reason, the person wants to wear it, right? It doesn't have to be beautiful per se. It could be like cheeky. It could be like, who was this on Twitter who's making the like, you are your ROAS, like cap and sweater and things like that. I can't remember. But anyway, like that's funny, it's like, I would want to wear that, like not in all contexts, but in some contexts. And so there's like so just anything that makes somebody actually want to wear it is my general view on anything with the company. The worst outcome is like a Google t-shirt. It's like, okay, all I know is that you got this t-shirt for free. I don't know anything else. So
the water. So I don't know if I ever told you about the Klaviyo hilariousness that happened, but like I've accidentally become the merch whore of D2C. And it was so funny because, and this is, I firmly believe everything you just said, because I actually come from fashion. And I have a very particular style. For people who don't know me, you'll probably see me in all black, chains, like that's my thing, right? And merch is a funny thing. If I don't like the merch, I won't wear it. Until I went to Disneyland and I went to my husband. I said, hey, husband, can you pack me some high, like white socks? Because I wanted to wear them with my outfit to Disneyland, whatever. He's like, sure, no problem. Packs it up. We get there. We get into the parking lot. I'm like, hey, can't wait to see my white socks. This man packed my Klaviyo branded socks. I got like some thing. And I'm like sitting there and like, no knock on Klaviyo, man. Like no knock, but like who's wearing Klaviyo socks? Like, let's be honest. So I end up wearing them to Disneyland. I took a picture of them. I was like, screw it. And I posted a picture and they were nice enough to send me a whole box of merch, in which I love now because that was really sweet. And that was a funny exchange. But back down to it, did I naturally want to pull the Klaviyo socks and put them on? No, I did not. I do naturally want to pull the Fermat sweater because it's a really nice acid wash green. It's great material. It's got a really neutral but good logo on the back. it's appropriately put in place. So serious kudos to you. And also to your point, there's a reason why AdBeacon doesn't have merch. And I have stuff that is just waiting to be released, but I want it to be good and I want it to be worth it. And you're putting money behind it. So no brainer.
Totally.
I'm so glad we aligned there. Okay. I have a question for you. Because you got your PhD, which, by the way, huge kudos, that's a lot of work. It's a lot of work and time, especially from MIT. I got my EMBA and that was enough for me. So for you to take it to the PhD level, mad respect. But let's just pretend that there's a bunch of kids coming into Stanford, freshman year. They know nothing about D2C or the world or whatever it may be. If you could give some words of advice to them now and what they should be doing and what they should be focused on, what would you do? What would you say?
Yeah, I mean, I actually genuinely think about this to some extent because I'm thinking about my daughters. But the primary thing that I think about in terms of general advice is whatever you're going to do, try to do it at a level of exceptionalism that you will be proud of. And don't assume that because you did it once for some period of time, that is the thing that you should continue to do. So I'll tell you like the two mistakes that most people make when they're like early career or younger adults or whatever you want to call it. Mistake one is assuming that like hedging your bets is the right strategy. So it's like, oh, I want to be good at a bunch of things, blah, blah, blah. It's like, no, actually just like see where you get excited and try to be exceptional at that thing. And for me, that thing happened to be physics. And so I was just like, I'm just going to do a lot of this because I like it a lot. I happen to be good at it. And so I'm just going to keep doing it until I don't feel like doing it anymore. And the second thing is this comfort with change. And you've had multiple careers too. So I feel like you'll have empathy for this. But this is a very hard one for most people, which is like people think that once you do one thing, the next thing to do is that thing at a higher level. And the number one place where I see people get tripped up is like a common behavior for, let's call it a Stanford grad or a Harvard grad. It's like, I'm going to like do consulting for 2 years, do banking for 2 years. This is like, a super common pathway. And then I'll like get on the phone with them and they're like, I feel like I'm good at these couple of things. And so I want to be in like a finance and strategy role. And I say, great. What about something totally different? And they say, what do you mean? I was like, why do you want to do that? They're like, well, that's what I'm good at. I was like, are you sure you're good at it? Or is that just what you happen to do for the past 2 years? And then they like struggle and you can see them like struggling to interact with this question. And I think that is those are the top two pieces of advice I would give people is like, don't struggle with that. It's like totally okay to have multiple careers, especially like right now. Yeah.
So good. That's actually such good advice because I think when you are at that level of Ivy League, you're almost told what you need to do and where you need to go. Like you're told what your career is. There's not a lot of like explore. You also have it's high risk. It's expensive. And you don't want to, you don't want to spend a lot of money in, I guess, a subject that your parents might not agree on for where you need to go. Number two, you might have a scholarship in a specific category, and then you have to stay there. And number three, it's scary. Risk is scary. And then a lot of kids go into finance or banking, like you were saying. And it was so interesting that you said that because I've asked them, like, what do you want to do? So I teach at California Lutheran University digital marketing. And I ask a lot of kids, like, what do you want to do? And they're like, this. And I'm like, why? And he's like, because I can make money. And I'm like, there's a lot of ways to make money. Did you know that? There's a lot of fucking ways to make money. And you're going to be burnt out. You're going to be 32. You're going to look at yourself in the mirror and go, who am I? And I don't know what's going on. And then you're going to maybe want to work at Taco Bell for a few years to pretend that, or not to pretend, but try to get yourself back in line. So to ask that question at a very early state or to say that to somebody in a very, very early stage is a beautiful thing. I appreciate that. That's what I'm trying to say. All right.
I hope my daughters listen to that at some point. I'm just nervous that when I say that, they're just going to be like, man, now I want to do exactly the opposite of that.
Well, if you are a shitty dad all the way through, they're going to listen to dad, right? It's when dad is shitty and then they don't want to listen to dad. There's a teenage year and then there's a year of like, I'm flailing. And I will say this as a female, going to college the first year, you never feel more alone than ever. And then you go back to your parents and you just talk to them. And it's a very complicated situation, but my father at the time basically told me, I don't care what you do and what your grades are. I just care about who you are. And that took like a load off of me because I was failing, like I told you. So I think when you say things like that, then they start to listen to you a little bit more. But that being said, we will end it on something completely different. And it's our hot take section. What is your hot take right now, whether it be in D2C, life? What is your hot take? And it could be something as simple as, I don't like mayo, or something really complex like, I don't believe in attribution. Also, don't say that because we'll have some words.
I don't believe in probabilistic attribution.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think we can largely agree. So it's not that I don't believe. Yeah. So
Also
I happen to
known
have.
as,
I
also
have.
known as.
I happen to have a attribution tag, but let's talk about the hotter tags. I guess
Okay.
the societal hotter tags. I like. I actually like. Some people think that we have an election coming up, and so it's like most people will say like, hey, I think this person, I support this person or I support this person. And I actually think that that's less important than the divergence of those people. And so the fact that, for example, Kamala Harris is the candidate without having to go through a primary process, I know a lot of people will say like it's good, and some people will say like, no, she was like the second on the ticket, so it makes sense. And it's like, actually, none of that is relevant. The thing that's relevant is that she's the candidate without having to go through a primary process. And as a country, that's an interesting thing. And it's an interesting question because most other democracies in the world actually do work like that. They just have the party appoint the leader, and then you vote for the party, and you actually don't vote for the leader. And so I was like, America is getting to experience that because of this kerfuffle of a situation. And so that volatility is good for our democracy. And the fact that we can allow for volatility is good for us. Similarly, like the fact that like people characterize Trump, and now how different they actually are, who knows? But the fact that people characterize them as like very different and that there's no centrist candidate, like I would start to get very worried if there was a candidate that appealed to 80% of the people. Because the second you have a candidate that appeals to 80% of the people, that person can do whatever they want. And that's an extremely scary situation for our democracy. And so it's like, people will say like, oh, it's like a Fosbian flop democracy. And, it's like, all this stuff. And I'm like, great, like it should be. And so like my hot take is like this kind of like sort of ability for the country to interact with high variance and high error rates, I think is a very reassuring thing.
I actually don't disagree with you. I like that they're different. I my hot take is Kamala doesn't know what she likes and doesn't like, and with Trump, same thing. It's all a game to me, and I also do believe that the party is the bigger whole that you should be listening to and understanding. I also think it's really funny to me because it's the first time. I think it was very necessary because everyone was, I hate Trump, I hate Trump. It was a lot of generalizations of what he was saying. And then now when they have a shift with Kamala coming into the space, now they're listening to what Trump is saying and people are really distinctly listening to what Kamala is saying. And I just feel like it's such a different tone than the last election. I also think it's going to be interesting. My hot take is everyone's saying that we're not going to do as well because it's an election year in ads and advertising. And I do agree that it's going to cost more because obviously, like, they're taking up a lot of ad inventory, but so is Temu or Timu, and there's always something. But I do think that it's interesting, like, it's causing this necessity to cause silence or create silence in a sea of noise. Whether it be everything is noise right now is what I'm trying to say. And everything that we do, whether it be advertising, whether it be for the election, there needs to be something that creates silence in the noise for anything to be heard. And I think it's really interesting right now. We're kind of going towards that. But my hot take is everyone who's speaking in absolutes as to what if we're going to do well, not do well, we have no idea. There's so much going around. It's so all over the place. I don't even know if I'm making sense at this point, but it makes sense in my head.
Yeah. So for what it's worth, I totally agree. And my approach to that is that I think that it's creating more of a barbell than it is just all like general downward pressure. I think like the best people are actually seeing better outcomes and the worst people are seeing worse outcomes. I don't think there's such a thing as like general downward pressure. And so I think that that's like roughly what's happening. And I think that there's this like issue of, growth cures all sins or whatever it may be. And so like the inverse, when it's like possible for everybody to win, all it does is like mask the fact that there are actually a cohort of companies that are exceptional and a cohort of companies that are struggling.
Yeah.
Because everybody sort of like rises up and then you like cover over the barbell.
It's an interesting way of looking at it, like a barbell is a great way to describe it. That's really cool. I love that. See, this is why I like talking to you, because I think we both have different perspectives, similar themes, but different perspectives in how we describe them. I love that. But anyway, thank you so much for being on the podcast. Every good thing comes to an end, unfortunately. But that being said, where can people find you? You like public speaking. So, if you have a speaking opportunity, you should be on a stage. Also, where can follow you? Let us know.
Yeah, for sure. So please find me on Twitter or on LinkedIn. On LinkedIn, I'm Rishabh M. Jain. On Twitter, I try my best to be somewhat funny and to out-meme Rabba, and I feel like I am making slow but steady progress. And on LinkedIn, that's where I talk at a whiteboard. And so hopefully some of that is useful to some of you. And yeah, would love to connect. Would love to connect with everybody.
Are we about to burn me again? Is it Rishabh or Rishabh?
Rishabh.
Rishabh. So I'm saying it correctly.
Yeah.
God bless America. Thank you so much. That would have been great. That would have been so cool.
Yeah. And thank you for having me. This was amazing.
No,
like I knew roughly what I was walking into with like the talking about failure thing. I just did not know how deep we were going to go. And I was like, hey, I'm happy to be as open and as deep as you want to go. And hopefully that is useful to people.
I think depth is the only way that we can communicate to people. Otherwise, we're wasting everyone's time. So thank you for really going there. And like, I appreciate that. And I hope people really get to enjoy this and it motivates them their day. So, all right, guys, until the next episode, thank you, Rishabh, for being on the podcast. And we'll speak soon.